Welcome to Radio CAHS, presented by CAHS Chief Executive Dr. Arish Anwar.
Welcome to Radio CAHS.
Welcome. It's I normally want to count the number of show this is, but Beck is shrugging her shoulders and saying this is show number 9. So welcome. We've got some special guests today, which I will reveal very slowly, because I think just to make sure that the suspense is maintained until the last minute. Can I just start by acknowledging the traditional owners, the Whadjuk people of the proud Noongar Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And reflect on some of the information that's been on the news this week, really telling us what shouldn't be a surprise to us, and that is the aspirations that everyone has for their children is absolutely equivalent, is the same, no matter what your ethnic background. And I don't know why that makes news, because I don't think it should be surprising that every parent would want their child to flourish. Now, we normally touch on some background news around things that are affecting CAHS, and I really want to start by acknowledging the incredible work that's been going on Ward 4A and Ward 5A. It's really very, very overt and apparent that one of the impacts of COVID has been on children and families' mental health, and that has been reflected in the number of presentations that we have seen in ED. And of course, we must never forget that of the need to concentrate on ensuring that we meet the needs of children. But I also want to acknowledge that throughout this, we have an absolute obligation to look after our staff and acknowledge some of the real challenges they are facing in the face of a changing clinical picture in terms of the children and the challenges that they are facing and how we help support them. So a huge thanks to the staff on 4A, a huge thanks to the staff on 5A, and also the emergency department where some of this pressure is being very acutely felt. I'm also aware that the mental health team right across the board, be it the specialist teams or the CAMHS community teams, are also facing similar challenges and trying to support families in the community. With this in mind, we actually went out to look at one of the community teams, and that's the team at Kandula. And it was fantastic to see their enthusiasm and passion in helping support children and families in the community, to their very, very strong engagement with the local school. And in the case of Kandula, actually the excitement around the Midland Hub and to more closely integrate with the mental health team and provide children with a seamless service. Now, some of this is celebrated in the annual report that's just been published, so it's a fantastic read. I know there's a 3-day break coming on, and everyone loves nothing more than to read the annual report. And if you're hungry for it, you'll find it on our website and also on the intranet page. And lastly, I think one of the really amazing things about CAHS is the way that staff celebrate and reflect on the incredible impact that team working has. The Stars of CAHS Q3 nominations has just closed, and we've had an incredible bumper quarter with 61 people nominated in total, and that represents one nomination for every 82 staff member, which is fantastic. I know that I started by reflecting on the challenges posed through the presentations with children who are facing mental health challenges. I think the ability for us to pause and reflect on the incredible work our colleagues is doing is a real cause for celebration. So with that, I actually want to do the awkward transition from an update from what's happening in CAHS to invite, and Beck, Beck is really looking tortured and in pain, knowing what a cack-handed job I'm doing, I actually want to present not Dr. Dan, but Dr. Briony. Dr. Briony Hazelton, welcome. We are super excited to have you. So, Dr. Briony, you're a consultant in infectious diseases.
That's right. Yeah, I'm a consultant here in infectious diseases, but also at Path West in microbiology. So I have two major hats.
And do you mind just telling us a bit about your background? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually, I went to university here and I started my paediatric training here at the old Princess Margaret, and spent some time then in Ireland and in the eastern states, predominantly Sydney, which is where I did my ID and microbiology training, and then I came back here. So it was coming home to come back to Perth Children's Hospital.
And I hope this doesn't seem like too crazy a question. Were you always interested in bugs, even at school? Or did you decide to become an infectious diseases doctor when you studied medicine?
That's a good question. It was probably more during study of medicine, yeah. And I think the thing that drew me to it was just the variability in it, and it is a field that is just constantly evolving, and perfect example is this year.
It is this year. I suppose one of the it's just that you mentioned that you work for CAHS, PCH, and Path West. I suppose it's a true bench to bedside subspecialty. So, what does what's the difference between the Path West element and the PCH element?
So the Path West is really the laboratory side, so that's the bench side testing. So my role there is largely in the interpretation of results, liaising the clinical teams to advise on appropriate testing, and within that also comes one of my interests, which is really hospital infection control, and I think having that microbiology hat and direct links to the lab really assists with that type of work.
Briony, can I ask, I don't think I could cope with a breadth of knowledge that required that much, to embrace so much information. Do you mind if I do sort of bring you to a matter in hand, which is the challenge of COVID? Now, I know that we talk about it every fortnight here, but it is on everyone's mind 24 hours a day at the moment. We continue to hear about it on the news, and I just wondered whether you could just reflect on, I suppose maybe what we should concentrate on is the challenges that we've witnessed in Melbourne and the challenge around PPE, and whether you could just reflect a little about PPE for us.
Absolutely. So part of my role as well, I'm in the Department of Health Infection Prevention and Control Advisory Committee, which is chaired by Chris Blythe. So CAHS has got good representation on that at a state level. And that's been a great opportunity to liaise with other heads of infection control throughout the state, and also with our colleagues in the eastern states. So, we're in an exceptionally lucky position here in WA, with no community transmission since April, and one of the aspects that's allowed us to work on is that we have got a good plan in terms of preparedness in PPE supplies and working out what we need, but also it's given us time to learn from others as to how this virus is transmitted from person to person. So one of the hot topics at the moment, and there's been a lot of media attention, is around the droplet versus airborne spread, which in my mind is not a black and white. I think we all pretty much accept at this stage that it's probably a combination of the two.
Can I be, Briony, I'm so sorry to stop you there. Could you just tell me what the difference is between droplet and airborne?
Yeah. So taking you back to first principles, all of us generate respiratory droplets when you breathe, when you speak. And
we're spitting all the time.
We're spitting all the time.
That's horrible.
And we're putting out droplets of all different sizes. So the definition of an aerosol, it's just a very small droplet, so generally less than 5 microns. And where that comes into differences in terms of infection transmission is that those very small droplets are able to remain suspended in the air. But in terms of the downside of that for a pathogen is that because they're very small, there's only a very limited number that can attach themselves to a droplet like that.
Right, that's fantastic. I apologise because I stopped your flow. So just a challenge that the droplet versus airborne is posing in terms of PPE. I'm so sorry I stopped your flow about that.
Oh, no, not at all. So, I mean, there's been a lot of debate about what masks are required for healthcare workers looking after COVID patients. And again, it's not an absolute black and white one or the other. I think the feeling is, and from what we're learning from the eastern states, is that it still probably is predominantly droplet spread, so from those large droplets, so requiring close contact with people. And that's where the basics of transmission-based precautions, so the physical distancing, hand hygiene, really come into play. But there does appear, and some of the experiences that we've heard from Victoria, is that if you're in a position where there's exposure to a lot of aerosols, so we're talking about, heavily populated wards with positive patients, difficult patient behaviours. So one of the challenges in Melbourne has been managing the geriatric population coming into hospital with, unfamiliar environment, and then delirium. So they've been mobile and yelling, confused, yelling, and generating a lot of aerosols. And some of those older facilities have probably had, direct patient to healthcare worker transmissions in that way. We've taken all of that information, and certainly, I mean, you would have seen in the WA Health PPE guidance that we do have flowcharts and different ways of stratifying what PPE you need depending on the scenario, and certainly we are taking into account that there are scenarios where the full airborne precautions are required.
So, Briony, that's pretty important because I suppose, and I might be reducing it to a very minimalist issue, but the reality is some of the challenges will be, well, why should they have PPE and why should I not? It is because of the risk of catching COVID is different based on the level of risk posed by the different patients. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's the different patients and also the different environment.
Okay, and again, just I suppose we want to count our blessings not just with WA, but for us, our remit sits in terms of hospital, within PCH. I mean, this configuration of having so many single rooms is an immense blessing, isn't it?
Absolutely. A lot of speaking to colleagues in Melbourne, where there have been a lot of intra-hospital transmissions, it has been those heavily populated wards with multi-bed bays, and a lot of them, once they recognised that this transmission was happening, decided to spread their patients out. So while you're still cohorting, making sure that there was only one patient per space. So we're already off the bat in a much better position, having such a high proportion of single rooms.
And can I ask you this issue of if you've had look, if it's unfortunate you do become infected and the vast majority of people recover, is that it? So are you immune forever?
That's, again, a fairly hotly debated topic at the moment, and just within the last month we've had the first case publications of people who clearly have had a second infection. So early on there were cases published where people remained PCR positive for a period of time, but that was thought to represent ongoing viral shedding from that initial episode. So
is PCR what the test that's carried out on the nose swab or on blood?
That's the one on the nose swab, so that's a molecular test that detects the virus itself, the nucleic acid of the virus.
Okay.
But in the last month we've had a couple of cases published where going back and actually sequencing the nucleic acid, it's clear that a person has been infected twice with a different strain. The case report that comes to mind is one from Hong Kong where a gentleman in his 30s had fairly mild disease back in April and managed to go off on holidays to the UK and Spain, returned in August, was asymptomatic, but because of his travel history was tested and again tested positive, and at that point in time his antibody test was negative, but then he seroconverted again. So it was, and they sequenced that, and it was a different type. So that was really the first case that we've clearly demonstrated that you could be infected twice. But I suppose it's still not clear what that necessarily means. I mean, he was asymptomatic, so that's somewhat encouraging that you still got some degree of immunity, but that's a one case, so we don't know what that means for the whole population.
I mean, 9 months on or so after the disease came to prominence, can I ask you, do you think we, in terms of therapeutic and understanding of how we treat patients with COVID, do you think we've moved significantly forward, or does it remain as basic as providing children with simply supportive measures to, self-limiting illness in the vast majority of cases, and in others, providing standard supportive medical treatment?
No, I think we've come quite a long way within a short period of time. So, I mean, we do have direct antivirals that are available. So remdesivir is the main one that comes to mind. And there's a lot of trial work out there for different therapeutics. So certainly, even for children, if we had any positive cases with that moderate to severe illness, we would be looking at enrolling them in a therapeutic trial.
That's brilliant. Briony, I think Dr. Dan, you have raised the bar for Dr. Dan when he returns. So I will tell him that very explicitly as well. But I believe that we have a question. Beck's signalling that we have a question. So would you mind just taking a question?
Yeah,
is that all right,
absolutely.
Briony? Thank you.
The question is, can you get the flu and COVID at the same time?
Yes, you can. So coronaviruses and influenza viruses are very different. They actually did report on this very early on. So back in Wuhan, I saw a case series of around 300 people where they looked specifically for flu and coronaviruses, because that was a period and a place where they had ongoing flu transmission during the emergence of COVID. And they did see a significant proportion of their patients admitted to hospital had both. What that means in terms of severity is not quite clear. That group appeared not to do that much worse than those that were infected with COVID alone, but I think there's lots of variables to that.
You've got a second question? Oh my goodness, we're playing charades on the radio, which is terribly unexciting to listen to. So second question, Beth.
The second question is, should children be wearing masks to protect against COVID?
So that probably comes back to geographically where you are. So I think in WA right at the moment, I don't think anybody needs to be wearing a mask because we have no evidence of community transmission. If we do find ourselves in a position where we do have widespread community transmission, then yes, I think that is an option. But I always think masks are the kind of cherry on top. They're only a small part of the kind of overall package of measures you can take to try and protect yourself, with the main ones being physical distancing and hand hygiene. So, yeah, I don't think the focus should ever be solely on masks, but it is part of the overall package.
I heard just one term used, hand, face and space. Wash your hands, don't touch your face and keep your space.
Yep.
Which is, I need that kind of stuff to remember the basics. Briony, thank you ever so much for coming. It's been absolutely fantastic, and I wish you a very joyful long weekend.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Call now on 6456 5629 or 0436 595 600 to ask a question.
Hi, how are you? I'm sorry, we're just doing a very clumsy handover, which is today's theme. I just want to say welcome to Shani and Mayor. Welcome, Shani. So, Shani Law-Davison, Mayor de Lande, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
No, we are super excited that you're here. So, look, I'm not going to, I should introduce you, but I'm refused to. Shani, Mayor, would you mind just telling us a bit about yourselves? Is that all right?
Sure. So thanks so much for having us on Radio CAHS today. We are both RMOs here at PCH.
So can I just highlight that it's Shani speaking?
Oh, yes, that's me speaking. We're both RMOs here at PCH. We've been here for about 2 years each, and currently we're both doing a medical service improvement program, which means we get to hang out with Dr. Aresh and lots of people.
Having regular tea room chats.
That doesn't give the right impression. Okay, so let's. So maybe, May, I'll start with you. Just tell us a bit about yourself. Is that all right? Tell us a bit about how you've ended up where you have.
Sounds good. So I have had a bit of a convoluted course to get here. So I'm from Adelaide. I grew up there. I did a Bachelor of Speech Pathology and Audiology there. And I always thought that I would go from audiology and speech path to being an ear, nose and throat surgeon. So I was lucky enough to get into medicine at Notre Dame University here in Perth, and so moved from the Territory where I was living and working at the time to study. And actually my boss, when I was an audiologist, was one person who said, "Oh, you're not going to do ENT, you're going to do paediatrics." And I sort of shrugged it off, thought it was a bit of a joke. And then all through my medical studies and working, I was always drawn to peds and loved the paediatric side of things. And so, yeah, I was working in Broome for a little bit, developing sort of professionally and personally, improving my skills in rural health and rural medicine, and then luckily applied and got into peds training here at PCH. So that's sort of how I came here.
Now, I know you're both super modest and humble individuals, but that's a pretty competitive thing. You guys are the cream of the cream. That's what we're lucky to have, isn't it, at CAHS, is the super elite in every subspecialty. I'm embarrassing you, but let's just call it out. Is that fair?
I think we're also very lucky to be here as well.
Okay, well, so we'll work well together. That's great. So, can I ask, Shani? Can I switch to you? How did you end up doing paediatrics?
So I grew up in Carnarvon in WA, and I went through school and always sort of wanted to do medicine, and then was fortunate enough to go into medicine at UWA, and then some way through med school I was in Esperance, and I was actually working with one of the paediatricians in Esperance. It was Dr. Skerlock, and at that point I thought, this is really cool. Kids are really tough. Parents they love their kids, they want the best for them, and I just thought that paediatrics could be something that I could consider doing for the long term. So at that point I finished my training and did my internship before coming over to PCH. I'd done a prac at PMH as well, so I was pretty excited to see what PCH would be like as well.
And can I ask you, you've sort of taken a tiny bit of a step aside from doing hardcore clinical medicine. You're doing a service improvement term.
Yes.
So, Shani, can I ask you, what are you doing as part of that?
So as part of this term, we get to learn how to do service improvement inside a hospital. And so we each got to pick a topic, and my topic is interpreter use in the inpatient setting. And essentially we were looking at how we can improve how it works in the hospital, and how we can support staff to, in my case, use interpreters better and more regularly.
And I mean, that challenge around quality improvement, I mean, just a really open and frank conversation. I mean, how bureaucratic do you find the processes in terms of driving service improvement? How is it a skill set that you're learning, or is it actually that you're just working out how to get rid of some of the barriers that are in place?
It's 100% a very different skill set to anything that I had experienced before. There's a lot of business and different things that go on behind the scenes, and I think it's really important for us as clinicians to develop that skill set and to have these experiences, so that when we see things that we would love to change, or that we think, I can think of a good way of doing that, so that we have the confidence and the capacity to suggest those improvements and know how to sort of navigate the system. I don't think anyone's trying to be difficult or anything like that, but it's just a matter of learning a different way of working.
And I know it's on my sheet to have given the shout, but maybe during this I ought to. These programs are very dependent on having supervisors who are passionate about driving change. And one of our superstars is Dr. Sarah Cherian, and you're working with Dr. Sarah Cherian. Is that right?
Yes. Dr. Sarah Cherian is my clinical supervisor, and she is amazing. She's definitely a champion for her patients, as is the rest of the refugee health team and many of the general paediatricians. Actually, as is the rest of PCH. They're all very motivated to help their patients. So, but yeah, it's been a real pleasure to work with Dr. Sarah Cherian.
And I won't ask you this question because I was going to ask when does digital start to kick in for interpreting service, but I won't do that. Mayor, can I turn to you? Is that okay? Thank you. That's absolutely fantastic, Shani. You come from a very strong rural health background. Is that the program you're doing at the moment at PCH, or are you concentrating on something else as part of your service improvement program?
So my service improvement program is not based on rural health. It's more based on culture and communication here at PCH. So my service improvement program is called Enhancing Communication Lines in PCH Stars, or ECLIPSE. And it's looking at the current sort of communication process, because as an organisation we expect, and our patients also expect, to have excellent care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So what we're looking at different sort of communication and team-based things happening within our after-hours team, and where that's breaking down and what we can do to improve it.
And have you come up with some solutions?
Yeah, so we've come up with 3 root causes where the breakdowns are occurring at the moment, which are governance, policy and procedure, and the other area is, for Sarah, functionality. And so we've used them to create a future vision statement, and we've had some really good ideas from people so far in regards to solutions. So things like a task manager to make that communication more transparent, and a good task allocation system, having a more consistent team within STARS, just to sort of strengthen that collaboration so that we can provide excellence, 2 of our core values.
Do you know what? I need to get you out on the campaign trail. Can I just ask you, just again, a serious question. What do you think it is that stops, because these must be frustrations that have been expressed over a long period of time.
Yeah.
What is it that stops people addressing some local challenges locally? Is it have you had any reflections while you've been doing this? Why is it that there's a problem here that I've got to solve, that's been going on for a while? Have you had any reflections around that? Is it just time? Is it and that's we've actually got people running around like crazy?
What do you mean? Sorry, Arash.
So I suppose my question is, how do we empower staff to solve some of the challenges that they find when they come, and daily frustrations when they come to work each and every day? Because we know those daily challenges exist there, because we all go home and go, if only. And I'm just interested, when you've been doing this, trying to unravel some of these problems, whether you'd thought, I think this is the reason why this hasn't been solved before, and it's needed me.
I think just as you've been talking, I'm thinking that maybe one of the barriers is knowing how to change things. As I've said before, we come through medical school and we learn lots about biology and that sort of thing, but we don't necessarily know how big organisations run. And so knowing how to change things is probably the biggest barrier. And things like the MSI program and lots of other things enable people to feel like they can actually potentially make some changes. That's probably why the MSI program is so great.
So let me ask you, so have we put you off clinical medicine and made you aspire to become an administrator, or has that brainwashing not worked? I thought every person would want to become an administrator.
Look, I tell you what, it's definitely a very specific skill set that I think you have to be very skilled to be able to do. So maybe one day in the future.
Is it a diplomatic no? And can I just ask you, have you decided what your ultimate careers are going to be, and are you willing to share them, or do you want to keep that under wraps?
To be honest, I think for me, I want to do general paediatrics. I love gen peds. I'd love to be able to work both here at PCH but also in rural and remote areas. But I also want to invest in children on a more macroscopic level. So I feel like the clinical work, and this is something that we've learnt through the MSI program, the clinical work is really important, but investing in children, so you're investing in the future, so you're investing in society as a future because children are our future. And to do that at a more macroscopic level, it's contributing to things like research and policies and procedures. So for me, I think I'd love to be able to combine the two. That would be my dream.
That's fantastic. Shani?
I am still in the exploring stages of working out exactly which area I'd love to go into. I definitely do love clinical medicine in the sense that you get to spend time with patients and with their families and potentially go through hard times and great times with them, and that's something that has drawn me to medicine and something that I love. So something clinical. So far I've thoroughly enjoyed the oncology term where I got to meet some really inspiring children and clinicians as well, but as I said, I've got a lot more exploring to do, I think, at this stage.
Look, Shani, Mayor, can I just say you are fantastic ambassadors for your colleagues and the JMOs. Hugely professional, dedicated, articulate, and child-centric. And look, thank you very much for taking time out. I know you gave me a time that you had to be out of here by 1:30 because you're running another project this afternoon. Thank you very much. It's been fabulous having you here. I hope you have a great break over the weekend. Take care.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you.
Look after yourself.
Welcome to Radio CAHS, presented by CAHS Chief Executive Dr. Arish Anwar.
Welcome to Radio CAHS.
So we have, do you know what, this is Dr. Shobi Maru here. Shobi, do you know what, you have the job I always aspired to have, which is the job of Chief Registrar. You're just looking at me. I was always super jealous. Now let me ask you a bit. Do you mind if I ask you just to tell us a bit about yourself, and then maybe what the role encompasses as Chief Reg at PCH? Is that okay?
Yeah, completely fine. Thanks so much for having me, Resh and Beck. So I was a physiotherapist at Auckland City Hospital in New Zealand, and I always had a desire to do medicine, and so applied and packed my suitcase up and moved from Perth, where all my family, moved from Auckland, where all my family were, to Perth to do med school at UWA. And quite early on, I knew that I wanted to do paediatrics. Then after med school, as a graduate entry student, I worked at Royal Perth Hospital as an intern, and then went straight across to PMH to do residency in paediatrics. And then, as you know, in 2018, I was involved in the move from PMH to PCH, and I was working in the paediatric intensive care then, and I was part of the team collecting the kids being transferred here in the ICU, so that was super exciting. And then have stayed on here at PCH. So have done about 7.5, 8 years in paediatrics across PMH and PCH. I've also done a lot of the peripheral sites that you get seconded out to, which has been great to build those links with Fiona Stanley, Joondalup, and I also worked in Kalgoorlie and Broome. So it's been great. Yeah.
Do you know what? I always find these discussions very humbling when I look at the achievements of the people who are just reflecting on their backgrounds. That is absolutely an incredible story. Can I ask you, Shobi, what's the difference between being a standard doctor and being the chief registrar, or being a standard registrar and being the chief registrar? Am I allowed to create that, distinguish between the two? Because there must be some roles and responsibilities that come with being chief reg, which are different to our standard registrar posts.
Yeah, so chief registrar position is one that you choose to apply to do. And I remember when I started at PMH, I can still remember the chief registrar that did our orientation and that cared and supported us and introduced us to the right people so that we made our clinical path the way we wanted to. It was Alicia Manley at the time. And when I started as a fresh, brand new intern, I felt supported, and I thought, right, when I'm 7 years out or 6 years in, I will do this. And then sort of 3 years into your training, you have to do your written and clinical exams. Super stressful time. And then I remember Dan Yo was the chief reg there, and he supported us through our curriculum for learning and, support. And so it's the way you give back to all of the junior doctors. You've received so much through your training at PCH, PMH, CAHS, and so you choose to do the Chief Registrar position so that you can then give back, and my primary responsibility is to advocate for JMO, which is Junior Medical Officer Wellbeing. Yeah.
And can I ask you, because Maya touched on this sort of the well-rounded healthcare professional doing a bit of education, a bit of research, and a bit of clinical service delivery. Is this issue of nurturing and mentoring and education where your heart lies? Is that what you think you will continue to do throughout your paediatric career, or is it that you're actually going to branch out into a bit more research, or has this been a passion? It sounds like it's been a passion for a while.
This has been a passion from day dot. So I think if you look through UW, when I went to uni, when I was in school, I always tried to choose positions where I could support other people, bring them up with me, and then also advocate for change. It's nerve-wracking because in a clinical role you don't learn how to chair meetings, and even now speaking to you I feel really nervous, and you just have to learn all of those skills with public speaking, chairing meetings, writing minutes. I learned how not to write a briefing note, things like that. Those are all skills that you develop as you're in a role like this, and I definitely see a future in it for me. I think as a consultant, it's definitely important to build these skills, and I'm very glad that I've had this great opportunity to do this job as I've just become a consultant now.
And we are so blessed that you have. And you said you were nervous. I have no idea why, because it's me who's feeling nervous, if I'm honest with you. So you have absolutely nothing to be nervous about. Congratulations. We are super excited, and I know how professional and dedicated you are. I think you were running a sort of telly round the other day. Now, can I ask you, Shobi, we've been very lucky because Shani, Mayor, and yourself have been very positive. I just wonder, life isn't always rosy. What are some of those challenges that either you have faced or you have witnessed others facing in their life? We're concentrating on PCH today, at PCH more recently, and it's been a particularly challenging year with COVID.
Yeah, of course. So I obviously started this role in February as Chief Registrar. My primary responsibility is to care for junior doctors and their wellbeing, and it's been really challenging this year because there has been an understandable level of distress with the amount of uncertainty that has been created by COVID, and this has impacted people across all areas of their life. If you look back in March, I was meeting with Simon Wood and medical workforce and other heads of departments to try and pandemic plan, and that was a massive workload to try and minimise the impact that the COVID changes would have on JMOs. So there were things that were decisions that were made, decisions that were being made or being considered, such as freezing terms, where JMOs might need to stay 2 terms in some rotations, which mean that if they're in Kalgoorlie, for example, they'd have to stay there, and if they've got family and kids and stuff, it really has a huge impact on them. And if they were pregnant, for example, then you wouldn't want them to be working in an area where they'd be exposed to COVID, particularly in the latter part of pregnancy, or if they had any immunosuppression or respiratory problems. So we had to, that was really impacting JMO well-being, and we had to really try and advocate for those JMOs to be placed in different terms and things like that. And even though COVID didn't hit us, we still feel it. We still feel the effects, and our colleagues over in the East are experiencing it, so we can feel it. And then going across, there's been so much uncertainty with people's exams, and that's across paediatric surgery and all subspecialties, and that really prolongs people's training from maybe, you know, a 6-year program already could then go up to 7 or 8 years, and that again impacts people's family planning, where they're living, and it has a huge impact.
Are you still noticing that?
Yeah. People are definitely, understandably, in a very high level of distress, given the level of abnormal events that have been happening and the level of uncertainty. So I guess the way we've dealt with it is been very, very transparent and open with our communication as to what we can do and what we can't do, and in a way just try to accept that this is the way things are and going with the flow. But one of the biggest examples is the RACP College said that they wouldn't have a clinical exam, and then now we're having a clinical exam and we're running it through video conference. So we'll be examining interstate candidates with our patients here with interstate examiners. And that takes a huge amount of organisation, not to mention that our candidates here for the first time ever will be doing video conference testing and practicing with patients. So telehealth here and Chris Kirkwood have been amazing. They've provided us with some laptops and iPads to start practice. And in fact, because we're in PCH with fairly new systems, we're actually lucky in that area. If you compare ourselves to Charlie's, who are trying to run the same thing, it's been really difficult for them. So yeah, I guess and then the other thing is delivering all our teaching has had to be through video conference. So we use a lot of MS Teams now in the PCH auditorium. And I must mention that we've now got a PCH education platform, which was brilliantly created by JMOs. And this started a long time ago with Rob Lethbridge and Dan Yo, and has just propagated with Adrian Tarker and Sarah Trinder and a whole group of people, James Gibbons and Steve Ellingworth, have to mention them. And it's amazing. So you can now go onto the PCH Education SharePoint and learn about conditions and watch lectures that happened yesterday from home.
And are those education sessions available only for JMOs, or can other healthcare professionals also access it to out of interest, knowledge building, etc.?
So at the moment it is available for medical staff with a HE number.
Okay.
So it's a COVID silver lining that's come from
remote learning.
Yeah, from remote learning.
And look, you are a classic, fantastic leader, because I don't know, during that gentle narrative and journey through the change in the way we deliver education, I think you have given everyone else credit by yourself, and I know that that needed a very steady hand at time of uncertainty, and I'm very personally aware of the incredible job you did. So I do want to thank you. I want to celebrate actually the real coup for PCH in making sure that we've not lost you to somewhere else. So it's a real win for us. Thank you very much for giving time out of a very, very busy schedule to come and share some of your journey with us, Shobi, and thank you for everything you do every day. And have a lovely long weekend.
Thank you so much.
You're a
Thank you.
Welcome to Radio CAHS, presented by CAHS Chief Executive Dr. Arish Anwar.
Welcome to Radio CAHS.
It feels like a real talk show today, which is fantastic, because we've been so lucky where people really giving up their time and coming to share their journeys with us. And so fortunate to have in the studio at the moment Carrick Robinson, the Chief Executive Officer of Perth Children's Hospital Foundation. Carrick, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Look, Carrick, just in case, sometimes in these discussions we forget a really critical message that we want to communicate, and I really want to make sure that you don't leave today without really having an openly expressed gratitude for the tremendous work that you do in driving the PCH Foundation and the enormously kind philanthropy that helps support it and ultimately translates into better outcomes for children. So can I just make sure I say a big thank you to you before we go anywhere?
Our pleasure. It's very close to our heart, obviously, and something we get up in the morning to do every day. And, we're just delighted to be working partners with CAHS and everybody within the hospital and community networks. We get much more back than we give.
Look, that's a very generous thought. Carrick, just do you mind, one of the things actually that's been lovely today is people have reflected on their journey in terms of how they found themselves in their current role.
Sure.
I mean, would you be embarrassed? Could we ask you that question?
You can. Yeah, I will be embarrassed, but anyway. For 20 to 25 years, I was in the marketing and branding industry and rose to from a very junior position essentially, and rose to become a managing director of a major ad agency in Perth, shareholder, and was very fortunate to be part of some significant brands in WA. The likes of Lottery West, did a lot of work in the health space with the likes of road safety and immunisation campaigns and sexual health campaigns, and always had a fundamental interest in healthcare, I guess, along the way. I'm the father of 4 children, so I had all these synergies lining up very nicely, and in the last sort of 5 years of my journey in marketing and branding, I was being frequently co-opted onto boards as a director with specialism in marketing and overall business governance, and that brought me in contact with the not-for-profit world very quickly, and it's a world that I've got a great affinity with, having seen it from a director's level. So I was on the board of the WA Ballet, what is now the Ability Centre. I was on the board of rising up to deputy chairman there, and I was on the board of Anglicare WA. So I got a full spectrum, and I was able to view the not-for-profit and social service industry from a very different perspective, I guess. I left my marketing and branding work after 25 years to make way for young people who had more energy and probably more brains than I did, and bought a couple of small businesses. But I really missed the corporate life and was getting very bored. And Anglicare WA asked me to take on a more active role, and I joined their executive, heading up marketing and fundraising, which is a very rewarding 3 years of my life, I have to say, in a very difficult community sector where the challenges are significant in the areas of domestic violence, homelessness, family relationships and those sorts of things. And I got a good cross-section of understanding of the impacts that has across Australia, across WA, particularly in the northwest. I was very happy in my role, and I got a phone call one day from a recruiter asking me if I'd be interested in a couple of roles they had on their books, and one of them was the PCH Foundation, I don't know, for some reason I was very drawn to that role, and it looked like something I thought I really could contribute to, and I was very fortunate to go through a pretty exhaustive interview process, got down to the final 2 and ended up winning it, and here I am, and that was 2.5 years ago, and it certainly has been, in my life's chapter, this has probably been the most rewarding job I've had.
Well, look, it's super lucky that you're there, and in terms of driving a very close working relationship with the PCH and CAHS, I don't think we could have asked for more. So thank you very much for the collaborative way in which that relationship is really evolving. I just wondered whether you talked about your background in marketing, and I noticed that everyone should have noticed, I would have hoped, but I certainly noticed the rebranding. Is that something you're free to comment on?
I am,
today?
absolutely. So we launched it a couple of weeks ago after a very long journey, it was a well-researched strategic project to really understand where our brand sits in the marketplace. We certainly suffer from an awareness problem and a knowledge problem as a brand. We're often confused with the hospital. People think we're just a department of the hospital, which is not a bad thing, but it doesn't give us, our own identity, and therefore contributes to people's lack of knowledge about what we do and what we stand for. And I guess that was obvious from our research that we were falling well short in both awareness and knowledge. And the truism in brands is that people will deal with people they know and understand, and we had pretty low marks on both. So the branding journey we embarked on, and I've got to give a big shout out to my head of marketing, Caroline Webb, who was instrumental in driving this, was to establish very clearly in the minds of our stakeholders that who we are and what we stand for, and the brand platform that we came up with strategic help from external consultants at the brand agency, who are one of Perth's top marketing and branding agencies, was this notion of closeness, because good brands have got to differentiate from everybody else in the marketplace, and this notion of closeness is really our differentiator, and that not only are we close to the hospital and the wider CAHS network, both in proximity terms, but we have a long-standing relationship with both, which gives us a closer understanding of their needs and understanding of how we can definitely make a difference. So closeness has been the sort of, I guess, the core of it, and the differentiator that was took us into this tagline of the foundation on the front line, which clearly we are, and we're talking to clinicians every day, researchers, allied health professionals, and others about what their needs are and how they're making an impact. And that's translated then into us being able to provide grants and support to CAHS and particularly the hospital that is far more impactful and needed and necessary. And we now reflect that in our brand. Our colours are completely different. Our look is completely different, which is reflective of the change. And we believe it really differentiates us and helps us stand out in what is an incredibly competitive and cluttered charity market in Perth. It's one of the most cluttered in the world, really, and the children's charity space is very cluttered as well.
And I want to just reflect on that, actually,
Sure.
because we are obviously very indebted to donors and yourself for gathering them together and putting the case forward. I just wondered, what is that scale of projects that you are actually supporting?
Sure. So currently on our list we have about in excess of 175 grants that we have under management, which have been applied for, approved, and money is now being made available across a plethora of different areas: research, equipment, positive patient experiences, education and training, and the scale of that has reached quite significant proportions. Last year alone, we gave CAHS directly and indirectly over $8.7 million, which was a new record for us, and takes our sort of last 23-year contribution to over $81 million. And we have a further $25 million in commitments in the next 5 years. So it's, from a scale perspective, it is significant.
It is mind-blowing, Carrick. I think we sometimes fail to acknowledge that scale. You said close to 180 projects and close to $9 million. I mean, that is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and we have such a great passion for children's healthcare and the work that your amazing people do, Arash. I mean, you're being very complimentary to me and our team, but I've got to say your people are extraordinary across the board, and we just have a great passion for making sure that we can help them do scale the great heights that they all want to scale, and we want to do more, and we have very ambitious plans to do a lot more.
That's brilliant. I suppose two things have been very prominent in the press, and I just wondered whether you want to touch on them at all. The bridge and the hospice.
Sure. That would be great. Yeah. The Kids Bridge, which, you're right, it's made the press and it's had a lot of controversial views about it over the years, but we're very proud of this project. We think a capacity to link the QE2 campus but particularly Perth Children's Hospital, to one of the world's great nature parks in Kings Park, and all the therapeutic benefits we think that's going to provide, particularly inpatients or very sick children generally, get away from the rigours of of their medical journey, is going to make a massive difference. And we know through discussions with various clinicians and people in the nature play area that the bridge is a fantastic idea. It's a fully funded $6.3 million enterprise. It's been built and owned by Main Roads, and from about December, early January, you're going to start seeing the impact of that, where the northern green space out between PCH and the multi-deck car park is going to start to see construction material on site, and it's right on track to be opened in the middle of 2021. And we're just delighted that
that is not a long time away.
That's not a long time away, and we know the current government Minister for Health, particularly Roger Cook, is very much looking forward to this being a legacy project. We believe that will make a significant difference for years to come, and I'll proudly drive under it every day as I drive into work and go to the multi-deck car park, and believe that's one of those things that's long overdue.
It's going to be. I mean, I think it's going to be incredible, as you say, for children and families, but also staff. As
exactly.
You highlight. I mean,
and campus people generally. I hope the staff of PCH and others use it, all the time, and the wider campus as well.
And can I ask you, Carrick, just about the second project that you had a fundraiser this week, just thanking philanthropy and just highlighting the work of the organisation. But the second big programme, I think, that you were talking about in the evening was, or one of the big programmes, was the hospice, and I wondered whether you wanted to reflect on that at all as well.
Love to. As far as passion projects go, this is probably right up there with everything that we do, I guess. And so we're very proudly partnering with CAHS and the state government to build WA's first children's hospice. We've made a commitment to fund all the pre-construction and the construction phase. At this stage, that could be multi-million dollars, and we've been we were very inspired by Bear Cottage in New South Wales, which is one of the original hospices in Australia, and we're very fortunate to be able to, through our network in the Sydney Children's Hospital Foundation, to be able to go and have a look at it firsthand. And I know a number of people from WA, including the Health Minister and others, have been to see it, and it is a phenomenal facility. But Australia only has three, one in Brisbane, one in Sydney and one in Melbourne, and we believe and understand it's a major gap in the West Australian children's healthcare landscape. So we're very proudly going to get involved in that. Work has already begun, and I'm delighted to announce that so far to date, we've raised $4.25 million. Oh
my goodness! How incredible is that? Now, I just wonder, Carrick, just because I know it's a Friday going into a long weekend, and I wonder whether that just celebrating and finishing on that very positive bit of information may be a good point for us to bring this show to an end. So can I thank you for giving up some of your very precious time? Can you please pass on our thanks to the rest of your team, and once again to all those very generous donors who in a very difficult financial year have been so supportive. So it's absolutely incredible.
No, our absolute pleasure, and I echo, without the donors we'd all be having a very different conversation, and thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Now, Carrick, I've let the other guests off a bit lightly, and they've actually bolted, but we've locked the door, so we're not going to let you out. Now, it's traditional for us to ask our guests what their favourite biscuit is, and I just wonder whether you have got one.
That's pretty easy. That's a Tim Tam.
Oh, okay, that's fantastic. Now, the other bit is I have a quiz, and again, the winner of the quiz, we will make a donation of $50 to their favourite to their chosen charity, and on this occasion, I'm going to suggest. Well, actually, I have to leave it to the winner as to what they choose, but I wonder whether they may choose a foundation. And the quiz today, which I'm going to leave you with, is this: you measure my life in hours, and I serve you by expiring. I'm quick when I'm thin, and slow when I'm fat. The wind is my enemy. What am I? So there's one to mull over the long weekend. You look as if you know the answer, but don't tell me. I'd like to finish off by thanking Stacey, Shobi, Carrick, Mayor. I'd like to also thank Briony for stepping in instead of Dr. Yeo and raising that challenge. DJ Houston, thank you as ever, professional, dedicated, and making sure the show comes together quietly in the background. Beck, thank you for guiding us, and please tell us what you think about us politely on cars.com at health.wa.gov.au. Thank you very much for all the hard work you do for children and families in WA. Stay safe, look after yourselves.
Welcome to Radio CAHS, presented by CAHS Chief Executive Dr. Arish Anwar.
Welcome to